I'm Cathie Beck. I'm the author of a memoir called Cheap Cabernet, A Friendship. So I was born a poor black child in Indianapolis, Indiana. No, it wasn't exactly like that, but just as a little, to put things in context, I was born to two teenage parents. I think my mom was 18, my dad might have turned 20 in 1955. We had 6 children in the family. It was a pretty rugged existence. My dad was a very handsome man, a dandy if you will, and didn't work for the most part. And my mom was sort of the same way. So it was a pretty hard-scrabble childhood. We lived in the middle of inner city Indianapolis, tucked up against the projects. And it was, I know that for a fact because we were the first white pickup stop as you went downtown to Indianapolis and back. We moved 10 times by the time I was 15 years old. Mostly we got kicked out of places, but there were other reasons. The good news in all of that is that my dad was a Catholic, one of 14 kids. So we sort of stayed in the same general neighborhood. So for the most part, maybe half of those moves. And I'm only telling you all this not to give some sob story, but I think we all have our stories, and I think it would sort of help how this book came to be to know where the origins were. By the time I was 17, I had a daughter. By the time I was 19, I had a son. All of the Beck children had teenage pregnancies. So it was not exactly this celebrated, everybody went off and did great things. But we did manage to make it to adulthood for the most part, and we're all here to tell about it now. And at the age of 22, I was divorced, completely alone, and raising 2 babies by myself. The family sort of splintered, 2 brothers died, parents divorced, and so everything was just sort of an explosion. Now that's the good news. That's the good news. It really is, you know, you get older, I'm 56 years old, you get older and you sort of come to see how past events set you up for whatever it is that you're doing now or what you've done along the way. So that's where I came from. So here I am, 22 years old, newly divorced. I followed a friend to New Orleans. Don't ask me why. It made no sense. I was 22. I ended up staying there for 10 years, and this is all during the 80s, from 1980 to 1990. Raising the kids alone. What did I do? Anything I could do to get grocery money. So I typed 130 words a minute, and it was a big law firm town. So I had a marketable skill, and I started this hokey little business where I would interview legal secretaries and use them as temps and farm them out to the law offices and take a little piece of the change off of their hiring, right? I would also work full-time as a secretary myself or as a paralegal. And to augment that, I would bartend, which was the stupidest thing in the world because I did not know what a mixed drink was. But I thought if I could buy a bartending guide, I could BS my way through the bartending scheme, and that's what I did. And to this day, I still don't know what goes in a Manhattan or whatever. I just remember I'd have to read it, and then I'd give them extra liquor, and so they didn't care that I didn't know what I was doing. When I got to be about 27 years old, it really had always bothered me that I felt like I got gypped out of a college education. I knew because of a whole lot of lawyers I worked with that I was smarter than a lot of them. And that's a fact. You know, ding-a-lings with blue blood and family connections were running law firms in New Orleans, and they shouldn't have been driving a car. So there was, you know, this resentment's building up. And I thought, I wonder if I could maybe take one college class and it would sort of be a release from the sense of loss that, you know, that was not going to happen. And so that's what I did. I went to the University of New Orleans. I got every single financial aid piece of paper they had in the 80s. Reagan and those guys, you know, you could still get Pell Grants. One thing you can do when you're a destitute single mother, at least in the 80s, is you could get Pell Grants. But it didn't take care of everything, it took care of some things. And so I was an English and journalism major. What I decided to do at some point was to go to both of those departments, and they would have a file cabinet drawer with all the paperwork about little scholarships. There's a $250 scholarship for short blonde girls that want to write or something. You know, they always had these little niches. And I filled out every piece of paper that I could, and I just sort of piecemealed this cash together. So this is why what we're doing today means so very much to me, because going to those classes allowed me to be the mule and the cart and the mule that was pulling the cart, and to really have this life of work and strife for years and years and years with no relief in sight. Well, the thing about going to school, going to college, is that if you just keep at it, over time, they've got to give you a degree. And so 8 years later, I woke up and I had a degree in English and a degree in creative writing. Now I'm in my late 30s. My kids are starting to do their own thing. My daughter was off and going to school. My son had just left to go to school. And so I had to reinvent my career. And again, I just kept this scrappy thing up. It was very difficult. My dream job was to go be a full-time journalist at a major paper, but I wasn't going to leave Colorado. And so there were only so many of those jobs available. And we're overeducated in Denver and Boulder. There are too many degreed people, and so, you know, supply and demand, it was almost impossible. So once again, I had to piece together a life, a work life. There was a lot of .com money floating around in the year 2000. Somebody asked me to do public relations for their company. I did. They gave me good money, and the next thing you know, I've got a public relations agency. I'm freelance writing for about 16 publications, and on the side, I had always been a short story and creative writer. It's really where it was at for me. And so I wrote short stories and got them published in literary anthologies. I'm doing all these various jobs. Thankfully, I was not bartending anymore, so I sort of eased out of that old hodgepodge of career and eased into these new ones, if you will. I lived in Boulder, Colorado at the time. My kids were out of the house. I had a best friend named Denise. We met through a group that I made up called WOW, Women on the Way. I put an ad in the Boulder Camera, and I wrote some stupid ad that said something like, "Women on the way to an insane asylum, a bar, whatever. Let's have a meeting at my house." Nowadays it sounds really dangerous and stupid, but I don't know what to say about that. We did. I got so many phone calls, I had to take the ad out. 8 women began meeting in my apartment, and Denise, one of the women, became my best friend for 4 years. We were joined at the hip. On paper, we should have never been friends. She was an educated, brilliant businesswoman, a Jew from the Bronx in New York, and I was a white trash from the Midwest with an ex-husband and 2 kids with no father and no money. It didn't matter. We were best friends. Fast forward to 1999. Denise had died the previous year. It was MS complications, but it's more complicated than that. So if you read the book, you'll get a little, that's not what the book is about. The book is about the friendship. So she passed away, and in '99, the Columbine massacre happened. And what had happened for me the previous year after her death was a profound grief like I've never had in my life. I was really paralyzed. I remember one day I couldn't find my coffee pot. Anybody who knows me knows that I need an IV drip of coffee in the morning and in the afternoon. I couldn't find it. I found it a week later in the freezer. So it was just sort of this, you know, out-of-body grief. The Columbine massacre happened in April of '99, and I was watching it, as all of us were in Colorado, stunned, jaw dropped, kids popping out of windows at Columbine High School. And it broke something open in me, and I thought, I wonder if I could write a short story about a girlfriendship. I did. It was too long. It was 90 pages. So I turned it into a book, and in mid-2000s, about 2004, I went to New York and got an agent. She sent it to all the houses. It was rejected 38 times over the course of a year's period of time. Now I'm a books reviewer for the Rocky Mountain News. I write for Poets and Writers magazine. I write for Writer's Digest. I know what a publishable book is. And it was very frustrating, so my agent decided they didn't like Denise. She was too crusty, too Jewish, too raw. That made me mad. I said, this is not a Lifetime Movie of the Week memoir. But I got over myself. And I rewrote it. I made it a little, tore out 2/3 of it and rewrote it. And gave it back to her. 3 years later, it's 2007. She takes it to all those first houses and to the West Coast publishers. Now we got rejected by even more publishers over the course of 18 months. So I've got 60-some rejections for this book, and I am bitter pissed. Because I'm reviewing for the Rocky Mountain News every week books that I would be mad if my kid wrote. They're so stupid. To top it off, the editor, who's a good friend of mine, of the book section of the Rocky Mountain News, she is a very nice person, and we had to argue almost every week that I was too hard on the books. So I'm like, too hard? Are you kidding? Give this to your second grader to edit. You'll have a better book. Mine's getting rejected. Now, parts of my book had won regional writing awards. Denver Women's Press Club, Louisiana Women's Press Club. They would take 2 or 3 chapters, and I kept winning these contests. And in 2009, I got my friend and super massage therapist, Maya Tress, to go to the Jazz Fest with me in New Orleans. And I went for the purpose of mulling over the idea of doing an online book launch party. Taking my PR background, taking what I knew to be a publishable book, and getting everybody I knew, everybody you know, 25 female-centered website audiences to all go buy the book on one day. So what I'm going to sort of walk you through is how I went from being a mad, unpublished author to doing an online book launch party. And what I did was, we sold so many books on October 6, 2009. The book went to number 12 best-selling memoir. On Amazon.com, it went to number 67 best-selling book. This was the original, self-published. And on October 6, 2009, this version hit Amazon.com movers and shakers #1 slot. Well, there are 5 million books on Amazon.com. I also built a merge email and sent print screens of these Amazon ratings to hundreds of book publishers and literary agents. 80% who were getting these print screens all day long. Look, now we're at 300. Now we're at 100. Now we're at 67. Now we're at number 12. Now we're number 1. 80% of them threatened to sue me for spamming them. But 22 publishers and 16 literary agents had their assistants, more often than not, because they're so important, email me and say, overnight that book to me. including 22 publishers who had rejected this version, not once, but twice. Now we're #1 on Amazon and they want the book. So what came from that was my dream agent, Dorian Karchmar, in New York City, took this book on and held an online book auction. Held a book auction, not an online book auction. She brought 3 major Manhattan publishers to the table with money. And on November 6, 2009, it sold to Hyperion Books. So, then the next phase begins, because now I've sold the book and it's not mine anymore. And what happened was, in a nutshell, Hyperion said, "We love your book. We're going to print 60,000 copies," which is a big first run. Usually it's 25,000 for an unknown author. Now go sell it. I'm exhausted. I've been doing this for 18 months. But it's my dream. I sold the book. That was the whole point. So the next phase began. And what I did was I sort of kept up everything I'd been doing before, but added to it. So Facebook and 40 other social media sites became the venue for attracting an audience. And I don't know, there's like 4,000 maybe friends between me and Cheap Cabernet on Facebook. And the residual marketing that happened is it's a perfect book club book. And so we began working with book clubs, and they will do Facebook and Goodreads and Twitter posts. You know, it sort of extrapolates outward, if you will. What got me the deal and the attention to begin with was to do things unconventionally. So I said, what if I did 8 Where is Cheap Cabernet Pouring This Week events around Denver? And it sort of be a flash mob thing. And I put it out on social media, send out press releases, hook up all my media connections in Denver. Not that they pay any attention to me because they know I'm a nut by now. Sent out press releases. And we did a series of events called Where is Cheap Cabernet Pouring This Week? And I made a trade with a digitally vehicle wrap company in Denver to wrap my truck in the book's jacket and to install a horn on the top of my truck that plays wine-themed music going around town. This was the very first one. This is my home. And they printed these banners in these big book jackets. The wine bottles are Julie Balistreri, a local winery that made special wine. This is in front of my house in 90-degree weather last October. We handed out 500 business cards with a Cheap Cabernet book jacket, and on it goes. And the Denver Post has written about this. Radio, I cannot tell you the number of emails and book clubs who have contacted me because there's been this viral, shameless, garish marketing that has been relentless. And so this is how it's gone for the last year. And you've probably already seen this. This is the Hyperion version of Cheap Cabernet. This was the Oktoberfest last year. Here I am on a street corner. I get my assistant, my boyfriend, who's now my ex-boyfriend. Can you blame him? He got drawn into every one of these things. We wear cork hats, and on it goes. Now, the book club campaign is part of this. We Skype and send free Cheap Cabernet wine to any book club that signs up to discuss Cheap Cabernet. We've done over 400 book clubs. You can keep going, Penny. And some of the bigger book clubs are national in scope. So, for example, the Pulpwood Queens is a franchise of book clubs around the country. I think they're in every state now. Girlfriendology. And one thing begets another. You know how that goes. So all of these awards and accolades have come as a result of this sort of multiple-pronged approach that, again, is relentless, shameless, and embarrassing at times for anybody and everybody involved. A portion of every single book sold goes directly to the MS Society. And so what's happened is, like this book club, I want to say they're in Henderson, Texas. This is a Skype photo they made their own individual contribution to the MS Society because, they liked the book so much. So that is sort of the story of how this book went from being really a dusty manuscript to being a published book by a major publisher with a contract that I have with the William Morris Agency as my agent, and securing all these accolades. It's the very same book that I wrote and had edited and everybody rejected 68 times from 2004 until 2007. Very same book, very same book. If you might be interested, I wrote a 3,000-word article for Poets and Writers magazine that tells every single thing I did for the 5 months leading up to this self-published version. If you want to curl up and put yourself to sleep, I'm happy to get that to you. And that's the story of how Cheap Cabernet came to be and how it came to look like this. Now, what's the point? What's this all about? Well, I treated my book like a business, and you're business people. And that made all the difference in the world. But I think this whole experience today has solidified 5 truths that I've come away knowing. I know there are probably 55 truths. When you're 56 years old, you can list truisms all day long, things your kids, your grown kids, will not listen to. But I thought I would just revisit them very quickly before I wrap this up. I believe that this project succeeded because I could imagine the end product. When everybody hated me, nobody wanted me, nobody gave a darn about the book, and on and on and on. I literally I went to the bookstore and looked at every single page that goes in the front of a book, and I had this self-published with the acknowledgments, with an ISBN number, with quotes, made-up quotes until I got it for real, and then I went and got real endorsements. In other words, I could see the end. I could see the end, even though I didn't know how I would make the end come. I could see it, and I think it's true. If you're raising a child, if you're building a marriage, if you're publishing a book, or you're building a business, I think time spent imagining the end, it's like a mothership. Like you can see it. And so that when all the bad stuff happens on your way, you're still okay, because you know what's there. The other thing I learned that's always critical, somebody else told me this a while back and it stuck with me. There's always a back door in. I think we get blinded by what is the conventional path, what we think we know about our industry. Book publishing in the day, forever, for decades. Here's how you got a book published. You didn't write the thing. You wrote a query letter, and it could only be this long, and it had to be just like this. And you could not then follow up with a phone call because that would make everybody mad, and on and on and on. Well, maybe it was done like that one time, but guess what? That was not working. So I had to invent a whole new way of doing something. And as soon as I stopped looking at that closed door and turned over here, ideas for finding that back door came up. The third thing of the 5 that has stuck with me is I learned and I applied the tenet of going the extra mile, working harder, longer, but here's the key, happier than anybody. It sounds cliche, and I don't mean to sound like I'm proselytizing here, but I took my laptop to bed and did not have a life for 6 months leading up to the self-publication of this. Because when I sent out those print screens showing that it was an Amazon.com #1 mover and shaker, I sent it to 600 carefully researched, selected publishers and agents around the world. And so the only way I was able to do that is I worked all day long, and then 4 nights a week or more, and probably on Sunday for a long time, I worked harder, longer, and was happy to do it. I was consumed with what the end was going to look like. And you know what? I was in a place too. If I did not get what I wanted in the end, I would have a pity party for about 48 hours, and it would involve cheap Cabernet. But then I was going to be over it. I was going to say, here's what I know. I can go to my grave, and I did, by God, by them, do everything I could. So the working longer, harder, and happier in the process felt right and still feels right. The fourth thing I believe in mightily is to soak yourself in a constant stream of positive, supportive resources. And I don't really care what that is for you. Plenty of people thought I was an idiot. Most people thought I was an idiot when I was doing this self-published thing and giving up my life and spending money I didn't have. I was listening to Wayne Dyer, who made me feel like I could be president. I was listening to my friends, who when they got the details of what I was doing, because I like to keep smart friends, would say, I think that might work. That's who I listened to. That's who I listened to, because when I would have a conversation, or when somebody would say, well, how are you going to pay that credit card back after you charged all that stuff to do your book? I'm like, well, I haven't gone hungry yet. It'll get paid back. And then I got rid of them. I didn't have another conversation with them. And I know it sounds like tunnel vision, but so what? It fed me. I went to sleep optimistic. I woke up eager to do the next task. I believe in soaking yourself with the juju, the good juju. I totally believe it. And then finally, I know it sounds hokey, I believe you are greater than what you know you are. And I had to believe that here. And it's not that I don't have problems like everybody else, and family strife and on stuff goes. But somehow, I thought if anybody could go do this in this unconventional fashion and be okay, however it turned out, that would be me. And I just knew I would be okay. And I thought it might work, because I think we think too small. We're always just like trying to get this task done, or trying to get this contract, trying to achieve this goal. And I think if we take a minute and we step back, we got more going on than we can ever realize. And I really believed that. It wasn't ego. And I think it's the thing that trips us up the most often and the most consistently. You are bigger and greater and much more powerful than you can ever know. And if you just know that, I honestly know, and now I really know, really anything is possible. So, without sounding like a preacher, that's the end of my talk. I cannot tell you what it means to me to be here. You'll never know. And if you have any questions, you cannot hurt my feelings, you cannot offend me. Now, if you tell me my dress is too tight, I already know it. I gained 7 pounds since I bought it last year. So even that won't offend me. Anything that you'd like to know, anything about the book or me or whatever, feel free. We are going to sell, of course, books. Know that any book that you do buy gets a donation, and we keep track with the sales department at Hyperion. Goes directly to the MS Society. And thank you, Brad Martin, Maya Tress, Paul Mulberg. You mean the world. I can't even begin to tell you.